In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. My name is Yusuf, and when I was 12 years old, I stumbled into a world I did not understand, a world hidden behind high white walls, where smiles could be traps and kindness could be the beginning of a bargain you never agreed to. I did not know then that poverty could make you blind, or that desperation could lead you to doors better left unopened. But I learned, and in learning, I lost the last pieces of my childhood innocence. This is the story of how I came to Saudi Arabia to visit my father, how I met a woman whose beauty concealed something hollow and hungry, and how I found the strength to walk away, though my stomach was empty and my heart was breaking. Some stories are told to entertain. This one is told to warn, to remind every parent, every son, and every daughter that sometimes the most glittering promises hide the darkest shadows. I remember every detail of the day I landed in Riyadh as if it was burned into my memory. The plane from Islamabad was small and old, with cracked leather seats that smelled of stale air and reheated meals. My hands were folded so tightly in my lap that my knuckles ached, and I kept pressing my forehead against the window, trying to calm the fear that churned in my belly. All around me, men spoke in low voices, their conversations a blur of Arabic and Urdu, but I felt completely alone. When the wheels touched down and the plane shuddered to a stop, my heart jumped into my throat. My breath came in quick, shallow gasps. I told myself I was brave, that my father was waiting and everything would be fine. But as soon as I stepped off the plane, the heat struck me, thick, dry, and suffocating. It clung to my skin like an invisible hand pressing me down. I followed the line of passengers through the glass doors into the arrival hall, scanning every face for the one I longed to see. And then near the barrier, where families waited with small signs and flowers, I saw him. My father, Abu Khalid. But he did not look as I remembered. His shoulders were stooped, and his once strong arms now hung limply at his sides. A wooden cane trembled in his hand. His face, once full and ruddy from working outdoors, had grown gaunt, with hollows beneath his cheekbones. Even so, when he spotted me, he smiled, a smile so sad and so full of love that my chest ached. "Yusuf," he called, his voice thin and cracked with emotion. "My boy, you've grown tall." I wanted to run to him, to throw my arms around his neck. But when I reached his side and saw the way he leaned heavily on that cane, something inside me withered. This was not the father who had carried me on his shoulders. This was a man broken by something I could not yet name. We took a taxi to the apartment, though my father insisted on paying with the last of the bills in his wallet. As we drove through the city, I pressed my face to the window, watching the tall glass towers blur past, their shining surfaces reflecting the setting sun like giant mirrors. But beneath the beauty, I felt an emptiness, a sense that nothing here belonged to me. The apartment itself was on the 4th floor of a crumbling building at the edge of the city. The paint peeled in long strips from the walls, and the hallway smelled of old cooking oil and dust. When we stepped inside, I saw that everything was smaller than I had imagined. The kitchen was no bigger than a closet, the bathroom door hung crooked on its hinges, and the single ceiling fan turned with a groan that never stopped. There were only 2 narrow beds pushed against opposite walls. My father's was covered in thin blankets folded neatly, though the pillow was stained where his head had rested night after night. On the small table beside it lay a plastic bag of pills, a glass half full of water, and a Quran, its cover worn soft from his hands. In that room, I first understood the cost of his accident. He could no longer work, and the small settlement the company had offered was nearly gone. Each day, he sat in the quiet, waiting for the pain to ease and praying that somehow, some miracle would arrive. Sometimes, when I woke before dawn, I heard him whispering into the darkness, pleading with Allah to forgive him, to protect me, to grant him strength. His voice was low and raw, as if the words themselves hurt to speak. I would pull the blanket over my head and pretend not to hear, because I could not bear to know that the man I thought was unbreakable was already broken. After the first week, I could no longer watch him grow thinner while I did nothing. So each morning, I slipped out into the heat and walked to the souk. My father never told me to go. He never even asked. But sometimes when I left, he would lift his head from his hands and watch me with an expression that was part sorrow, part relief. The market was always crowded. Men haggling over crates of dates and sacks of rice. Women in black veils choosing vegetables with practiced hands. I stood near the corner with the other boys, offering to carry bags or sweep the steps of the shopkeepers. Most of them looked at me kindly but shook their heads, their eyes darting to the uniformed guard who patrolled the rows to catch children working illegally. Some days I earned a few reals carrying boxes behind the stalls. Other days I returned home empty-handed. But even then, I could not stop. I was afraid that if I did, I would have to face the truth, that we were alone here, and no one was coming to save us. It was near evening when I first saw her. The sun was setting behind the rooftops, turning the city the color of embers. I was sitting on the curb, my arms wrapped around my knees, trying to ignore the hollow ache in my belly. I had not eaten since dawn. I closed my eyes and prayed quietly that Allah would not let me fail my father. When I opened them again, I saw the black SUV. It rolled to a stop in front of me, its tinted windows reflecting the sunset in perfect detail. For a moment, I thought it must be a mistake. No one in such a car would ever notice a boy like me. Then the door opened. A woman stepped out, her white abaya falling around her in graceful folds. Her face was framed by a silk scarf, and her lips were painted the same dark red as the sky. When she removed her sunglasses, her eyes were dark and searching. They swept over me slowly, as if she were studying something she might buy. "You look tired," she said, her voice soft enough that I had to lean forward to hear. "What is your name?" "Yusuf," I whispered, though my throat was so dry the word nearly stuck there. Her smile was gentle, almost maternal, but her eyes did not match her smile. They were cold, flat, like polished stones. "I have work you can do," she continued, her tone so kind I felt tears gather in my eyes. "Clean work. Safe. You can help your father." In that moment, she could have said anything, and I would have agreed. My fear, my hunger, my shame, they were louder than any caution. I nodded, sealing my fate without even realizing it. The next morning, her driver came for me. His name was Basim. He was a tall man with a thick beard that had gone gray in streaks, and a scar like a pale river curved down the side of his cheek. He didn't smile when he saw me. He only motioned for me to get into the back seat. As the SUV pulled away from the crowded streets, I watched the city change. The buildings grew taller and cleaner. The traffic thinned, replaced by wide avenues lined with palm trees. At each stoplight, I studied Basim's eyes in the mirror. They were dark and hard, as if they had seen too many things a man ought to forget. We drove for what felt like hours. My stomach clenched tighter with every kilometer. It was not fear of her house, exactly. It was fear of the unknown, of being 12 and too far from the one person who would protect me if something went wrong. At last, we turned into a long driveway behind white iron gates. They swung open without a sound, revealing gardens so perfect they looked unreal. Roses climbed over trellises. Small fountains splashed in carved stone basins. The grass was so green the first wondered if someone painted it. The bungalow itself was enormous, with golden trim around the windows and an arched doorway carved with Arabic calligraphy. When I stepped out of the car, the air smelled of jasmine and something sharp and sweet underneath, a perfume that made my head swim. Inside, everything gleamed. The floor was a sea of white marble, so smooth I was afraid my sandals would leave marks. Tall vases stood in every corner, filled with lilies and orchids. Heavy curtains hung from the high windows, filtering the sun into golden pools of light. For a moment, I forgot my fear. I had never seen such beauty. But as my eyes adjusted, I noticed the silence. A silence so complete it felt unnatural, as if the house itself was holding its breath. That was when Layla appeared. She wore a pale blue uniform that matched her calm, practiced smile. Her hair was hidden under a white scarf, and when she spoke, her voice was gentle in the same way Madam Samira's had been, too smooth, too soft to trust. "Welcome," she said, her gaze flicking over my dusty clothes. There is no need to be nervous. Madam has a very generous heart. She knelt in front of me to straighten my collar. Her fingers were cool and smelled faintly of soap. I tried to look into her eyes to see whether she was kind or only pretending, but she turned away too quickly. Basim set my small bag on the floor with a thud. He did not look at me again before he left. I heard the door close behind him with a hollow click, and in that moment I understood that I was alone. Layla led me through a long corridor lined with paintings of places I could not name, mountains capped in snow, oceans that went on forever. The air grew colder the deeper we went, and the perfume grew stronger, coiling in my nose like invisible smoke. She stopped in front of a door carved with delicate patterns. "This will be your room," she said. "You will stay here when you are not needed. You will eat here, unless the madam requests your company." I stepped inside. The walls were painted cream, and the bed was so large it seemed made for someone twice my size. There was a wardrobe already filled with clean clothes, soft white shirts, pressed trousers, shoes so new they still smelled of leather. For a moment, I thought I had been mistaken to feel afraid. Perhaps this was kindness. Perhaps she truly only wanted to help. But when I turned back, Layla was watching me with an expression I could not name, something between pity and regret. "If you need anything," she said softly, "just press the bell by the bed." Then she closed the door, and I was alone with the silence. The days that followed passed in a strange, bright blur. Each morning, Basim collected me from the apartment and drove me past miles of sun-baked roads to the bungalow. Each morning, Layla greeted me with the same sad smile. She taught me how to do things I had never imagined I would need to know, how to stand without shifting my weight, how to bow my head just enough to be respectful, how to keep my eyes lowered when Madam Samira spoke. "You must be graceful," Layla said one day as she balanced a book on my head. "The madam appreciates refinement." I learned how to pour tea without spilling a drop, how to polish silver trays until they reflected my face like a mirror, how to walk silently on marble floors. When I did well, Layla would not approve. But when I made a mistake, when my hand shook or my voice broke, her expression grew distant, and she would glance toward the door as if someone might be listening. Sometimes, Madam Samira appeared in the doorway to watch. She never entered fully, only lingered in the shadows. "You are learning quickly," she would say, her voice low and almost affectionate. "You remind me of someone." Once I found the courage to ask who. "My son," she replied, her gaze drifting past me to something only she could see. "He disappointed me." Then she left, her perfume hanging in the air long after the door closed. Those were the moments I began to feel the first real fear. Because I knew, without understanding how I knew, that she had not brought me here out of pity. As the days turned into weeks, the feeling of unease grew heavier. At night, I lay in the wide bed in my father's apartment, staring at the ceiling fan as it groaned and clicked above me. I would think of the house, of the silence that swallowed every footstep, of the hidden glances Layla exchanged with Basim, of the way Madam Samira's eyes lingered on me when she thought I was not looking. One afternoon, as I carried a tray of tea to her sitting room, I caught Basim watching me from the hallway. His arms were folded over his chest, and his face was unreadable. When I passed him, he spoke in a voice so low I almost did not hear. "Be careful, boy," he murmured without meeting my gaze. "Not everything here is what it seems." I wanted to ask him what he meant, why his eyes were so full of something like regret, but my throat closed around the words. Instead, I nodded, though I did not understand, and I walked on into the darkness of that house. It was on the 30th day that everything became clear. That morning, Basim arrived earlier than usual. He did not say a word as I climbed into the back seat. The drive felt longer, as though the road itself was reluctant to deliver me. My stomach twisted with each turn, and I found myself wishing that something, anything, would stop us from reaching that gate. But the gate did open, smooth and silent as always, revealing the garden as perfect as the day I first saw it. The fountains still played their soft music. The roses still glowed in the sun. Nothing had changed, and that was what frightened me most. When I entered the house, The air smelled even stronger of jasmine. It was so heavy that I coughed. No other staff moved in the halls. The silence had grown so complete it felt alive, as though the house itself were holding its breath. Layla was not waiting to greet me. There was no tea set laid out in the kitchen. The lights were dim, and every step I took echoed off the marble like a drumbeat. I followed the trail of perfume down the corridor to the sitting room. The door was ajar, and beyond it, a golden glow spilled across the floor. When I pushed it open, I froze. Madam Samira stood by the tall windows. The curtains were drawn, and behind her, the last sunlight turned the glass to fire. She wore a dress the color of pomegranate seeds, red so deep it looked black where the folds gathered. Her hair fell loose down her back, and around her throat glimmered a thin gold chain. For a moment, she did not turn. She simply watched her own reflection in the glass, one pale hand resting against it as if she were greeting someone I could not see. Then she turned slowly to face me. "You came," she said softly, as though she had doubted I would. "Good boy." Her eyes traveled over me from head to toe, lingering in a way that made my skin crawl. I clutched my hands behind my back to keep them from shaking. "Today is special," she continued. "Today, you will finally understand why I chose you." She gestured to the small sofa against the wall. "Sit." I obeyed because I could not think of any other choice. My legs felt hollow, as if they might fold beneath me. She walked closer and lowered herself to sit beside me. Her perfume surrounded me, thick and dizzying. I looked down at my shoes, willing myself not to cry. "Do you know," she murmured, her voice so gentle it could have been mistaken for affection, "that you remind me of the boy I raised? The boy who betrayed me." Her fingers brushed my cheek. "You are what he should have been, obedient, grateful." A tremor passed through my body. My breath came in shallow gasps. I tried to pull away, but her hand fell to my knee, holding me still. Her other hand reached into the table drawer. I heard the soft rasp of paper as she drew out an envelope, thick, stuffed so full of bills it strained at the corners. "This is for you," she said. "For your father. Enough to ease all your troubles." I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes. For one wild moment, I imagined taking the money, imagining my father sitting upright in bed again, the bills paid, the medicine bought, his shoulders straight once more. But then I looked at her hand on my knee, the way her fingers pressed into my skin, as if she were claiming me. And I heard my mother's voice in my head, "No wealth is worth your soul." I swallowed hard. My voice was thin, so small it seemed to disappear into the vast room. "I'm sorry," I whispered, though my heart was hammering so loud I feared she would hear it. "I can't." Her face did not change at first. She kept smiling, but the light in her eyes flickered like a candle in a sudden wind. "What did you say?" she asked, her voice low and dangerous now. "I can't," I repeated, stronger this time. "I have to go home." The silence that followed felt endless. Even the fountains outside seemed to stop their gentle splashing. Her smile vanished, replaced by something brittle and cold. "You are nothing," she hissed. "Do you understand? Nothing. You will leave here with nothing, and your father will suffer because of you." My throat tightened. For a heartbeat, I almost believed her. Almost. Then I remembered the nights I lay awake in that cramped apartment, listening to my father's whispered prayers. I remembered the way his hand had rested on my shoulder when he told me to be brave. I took a slow breath. With shaking fingers, I set the envelope on the table between us. "I'm sorry," I said again, though I no longer felt sorry at all. Then I stood. I did not look back. I did not let myself see her face as I walked to the door. My legs were weak, but they carried me across the marble floor and through the dark hall until I stepped outside into the cool night. For the first time in a month, the air smelled clean. Basim waited by the car. When he saw me, his eyebrows rose in silent question. I only shook my head. Something passed across his face, a flicker of something almost like respect. He did not speak as he opened the rear door. As we drove away, I looked back once. The bungalow gleamed under the floodlights, beautiful as ever, but now I saw it for what it was, a gilded prison built on sorrow. It was nearly dawn when Basim stopped in front of the apartment. The call to far prayers echoed across the rooftops, rising and falling like a promise. I climbed out of the car, my legs unsteady. For a moment, I simply stood there, breathing the dusty morning air. Each inhale felt like a piece of myself returning. When I stepped inside, the apartment was dim. My father sat in the corner near the window, his hands resting on his cane, the Quran open across his knees. He lifted his head as the door clicked shut behind me. His eyes were shadowed with worry, but when he saw my face, something in them eased. I did not speak. My throat was too tight for words. I crossed the small room in 3 steps and fell to my knees in front of him. His hands rose, resting on my shoulders, warm and steady. "I'm sorry," I choked. I couldn't do it. His hands tightened, and for a long moment he said nothing. Then his voice, rough and quiet, broke the silence. "You did the right thing, Yusuf," he murmured. "You did the only thing. Allah will see it, and He will not forget." In that moment, I believed him. The weeks that followed were hard. The money did not return. The medicine grew scarcer. There were days when hunger gnawed at us like a rat. Days when I wondered if I had been a fool to walk away. But every morning when I opened my eyes, I felt lighter. I knew I had left something behind in that house, something dark and poisonous. And every night when I closed them again, I thanked Allah for guiding me out. Sometimes I still dream of Madam Samira, her red dress, her perfect smile, her cold eyes. I wake with my heart racing, my palms damp with sweat. But then I remember how I walked away, and the fear passes. Because dignity, once given up, is nearly impossible to reclaim. But when you hold it tight, even if you have nothing else, it becomes the one thing no one can ever steal. May Allah protect every child from such trials. May He give us the strength to choose what is right over what is easy. And may He remind us always that no palace, no wealth, and no promise can ever be worth the price of our souls. Ameen.